Front and Center. Front and Center. A focus on important and significant developments affecting the lives of Filipinos, not only in the Philippines, but also those living and working around the world. Join us in Front and Center. Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Welcome to Front and Center, where we focus on developments in the Philippines, legislation that provides policies and directions that strives to promote a better economy for the country, issues that concern the welfare and well-being of every Filipino. All of these and more will be Front and Center. And you can watch this program on our Facebook page and YouTube channel, Radyo Pilipinas World Service. And you can hear this broadcast on our audio streaming through PBS Evox receiver app. Also on our shortwave broadcast through shortwave frequencies. That's 12.020 megahertz, 15.640 megahertz, and 17.665 megahertz. This is your host, Jerome Toledo. Let's begin Front and Center on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Front and Center. Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Just recently this week, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. said a reset in Philippines-China relations may be inevitable as global geopolitical dynamics continue to shift, while reiterating Manila's position against war amid the ongoing Middle East conflict. In an interview with Bloomberg television made public on Tuesday, President Marcos Jr. pointed to ongoing changes in international relations driven by rising global tensions. And he noted a wider restructuring in international system. And also in that said interview, Marcos said the Philippines continues to separate its territorial disputes with China from economic engagement. So what does this mean of this statement coming from the president that the resetting ties of Philippines-China relations is inevitable? So we asked a professional insights regarding this particular statement, and we now joined by a professor or foreign policy expert and also the president of the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies and research fellow at Asia Pacific Pathways to Progress Foundation, none other than Professor Lucio Pitlo III. Good morning, Professor Lucio. Thank you so much for joining us here in the program, Front and Center on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Jerome, good morning to all the listeners to your program.
Okay, so here we are. This week, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. said in a interview in Bloomberg television, he said that a reset in Philippine-China relations may be inevitable as global geopolitical dynamics continue to shift, while reiterating Manila's position against the war amid the ongoing Middle East conflict. Actually, I'm going to play a portion of that interview of the Bloomberg television with President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Let's listen in.
Is there reason to think that there needs to be a reset in relations with China?
I think it's certainly going to happen. I don't think that's something that is like an option. It's happening now. There's going to be a very, very serious restructuring. I remember I was watching Prime Minister Wong from Singapore, and he was saying we will have to redraw all of our even our legal relationships in terms of the international law, in terms of all of these things. They will have a lasting effect, and there will have to be a new normal.
Professor Lucio Pitlo III and then Marcos Jr. signaled the major shift or restructuring in global and regional relations, including with China, is inevitable and already underway. So that's what President Marcos Jr. has stated there and expressed in that interview with Bloomberg Television. So it described it as a new normal. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, certainly. I think this is a major oil shock that we are experiencing right now. And similar to the oil crisis that we experienced, the world experienced, not only the Philippines, back in the 1970s, I think there will be some restructuring, reordering in the international affairs. And so I think this is where the president is coming from. And in his conversations with other leaders of ASEAN, he referenced Prime Minister Wong of Singapore. So I think this kind of idea that the world is changing, and so there is a serious need to rethink and revisit relationships with major partners or with neighbors. I think it follows. And so this is where I think this restructuring of relations with China, which is the country's largest trade partner, now in its 10th year. No? So China became the Philippines' largest trade partner in 2016. Now it's 2026. So consecutively for the last 10 years, this is the largest trade partner of the country. But the volume of trade is still relatively meager compared to the trade volume of China with our other neighboring ASEAN countries. And while China is a major economic actor, the Philippines also have disputes,
Yes.
The president mentioned that. But there is a need to insulate relations, the overall bilateral ties, from this maritime and territorial role. And so I think there is a strong statement and a signaling of intention to reframe, to change the structure of bilateral ties with a major partner.
Okay. And you mentioned about earlier that the world is changing, and now the statement of President Marcos Jr. reflects changing dynamics, not just between the Philippines and China, but globally. So, is it safe to say that our relationship with China is now warming up?
Well, we can say that. I think the remarks hint at a toll, or at least an interest to improve relations. As we all know, the Philippines is hosting the rotating chairmanship of ASEAN this year, while China, on the other hand, is the host of the APEC. And so I think economics will be high in terms of improving relations. The immediate need of which is to, the urgency brought about by the escalating war in the Middle East, the need to secure supply of energy, and the Philippines sources part of its fuel from China. And so I think this is where parallels between Marcos Senior administration, his father, the father of the incumbent president, when the Philippines normalized or established diplomatic ties with Beijing, the one of the items covered there was to source crude, source petroleum from China,
right,
which at that time is a major, still a net exporter of oil, because their economy is not as big as they have right now, so they can still afford to export energy. And the Philippines at that time, as is now, the dependence on Middle East for imported fuel is high, and it has changed very little since then. And so now we are one of the most vulnerable countries, including in ASEAN, compared to our neighbors like Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam, which have some domestic capacity to extract, petroleum. They have some reserves And so they are in some way in a better position than us in terms of dealing with this ongoing crisis. But our ability to harness our own petroleum resources is hampered by technological, financial, and also political risk. And so this is where I think the relations with China will help in terms of getting immediate, an agreement to probably increase the shipments of fuel from China to the Philippines. I think if an understanding can be reached, and at the same time even open potential spaces for joint development in the West Philippine Sea, although, of course, we all know the legal and political constraints of that.
Okay. But at the same time, Professor Lucio Pitlo, he referenced the idea that national law and agreements may need to be redefined due to evolving geopolitical tensions, given that we have now the Middle East tension. So does that suggest long-term implications for diplomacy, trade, and territorial disputes?
I agree. I think there needs to be some serious recalibration, and we have to understand that our vulnerability, our energy security is very exposed to external contingencies, to events that are beyond our control. For instance, this ongoing U.S.-Israel, Iran war,
tension. Yeah.
this is something beyond the control of all countries, including the Philippines. But because of our high exposure to Middle East oil, we have to live with the consequences of whatever happens from that region. And we also have a very big diaspora community there, over 2 million.
Yes.
So if in case war does not subside, if it further escalates, then it will put our kababayans, our OFWs on the line. And we may have to get the support of partners, to extract, to repatriate our people, to bring them back home. And so I think this is a wake-up call for the Philippines in terms of improving its energy security by tapping domestic sources, not only petroleum, but also renewables like wind and solar, of which we all know Chinese technology and Chinese capital is very helpful in that regard. And in the short run, I think the immediate need to get steady supply of oil will be very helpful for us to stave off. The president already declared that we are already in a national energy emergency.
Yes.
And, we have like 2 months of reserves. And if this conflict continue beyond that, it will be a disaster for us.
Yes.
So I think the recalibration, the rethinking of ties, the trying to, park or at least compartmentalize our disputes so that other aspects of the relations, including the immediate need to source energy, may get more traction.
Okay. All right. And also, you mentioned earlier about the China being an important partner in trade and investment, and at the same time, although we have issues with China in terms of territorial disputes, but we try to keep our economic cooperation with China afloat and separate from disputes in the South China Sea. So what's your reaction first on that, of how President Marcos Jr. should separate the economic discussions with or from the territorial disputes?
Well, I think it has to be done. It is being done by our other neighbors in ASEAN. Remember that the South China Sea dispute is a multi-party dispute. This is not only between the Philippines and China. There are other contestants, other claimants, including our fellow ASEAN neighbors, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and China also have some disputes with Indonesia on this sea space. But all of these neighbors, our other ASEAN neighbors, are finding ways to expand, even deepen economic cooperation with China, including in the fields of energy, while at the same time keeping their position. In fact, they're even reinforcing their position.
Yeah.
Malaysia is the biggest extractor of oil and gas
Yes.
in the South China Sea. Vietnam is doing a lot of reclamation in the Spratlys. So, but despite of this, they are able to maintain very constructive, very productive relations with Beijing.
Yes.
And so I think this is not a zero-sum game. Standing up and keeping your position in the South China Sea does not come and should not come at the expense of having deteriorating relations with your largest trade partner. So we had done that. We had done this before. The Duterte administration
Yes.
also tried this approach of setting aside or at least compartmentalizing disputes or insulating broader relations from one aspect of the relations, which is the Philippine Sea dispute or South China Sea dispute. It has been done, and our other neighbors continue to do it. So I
Yes.
think it is high time for us to stabilize our relations with China.
Yes. Okay. And also, there is a possibility that the joint gas exploration in disputed waters with China is on the table. So that's a possibility of a joint energy development, but it will be rather complicated, Professor Lucio Peter III, since right now we admit that territorial disputes with China is still ongoing. There's some series of radio challenges and also water cannoning of our ships. And at the same time, President Marcos hinted that current geopolitical pressures might push both sides towards a compromise. And also there are officials in our government that expresses their sentiments towards China's action in that disputed waters. So, how is this going to play out?
Well, I think it's very important for us to continue to keep our position, even strengthen our position in the West Philippine Sea, as our other neighbors are doing. So I mentioned Malaysia continues
Yes.
to develop, extract, exploit oil and gas in fields or offshore blocks that are within the Rhinas line, within the EEZ of Malaysia off Sarawak. And the same goes for Vietnam, continue to build structures in its occupied features in the Spratlys. While at the same time, doing all of these things and at the same time expanding and deepening economic cooperation with China. So it's not a black and white, So
Yeah, that's right.
strengthening your position in a flashpoint like the South China Sea need not come at the expense of antagonizing your biggest trade partner.
Yes.
So it is possible. It can be done. So I think it is high time for us to also, learn a page from our neighbors.
Yes. And it's never
in
too
terms
late.
Of, managing their relations with China, while at the same time not giving up, actually strengthening their position on this flashpoint.
And it's never too late to establish ties with Beijing, despite our claims there in the disputed waters with China. And after all, President Marcos Jr. is signaling a pragmatic and balancing approach regarding this issue in the resetting ties with China. And also, do you think, I would like to ask this, Professor Lucio, do you think the situation right now, or this issue with resetting ties of our relationship with China, would that affect the public opinion because recently 6 in 10 Filipinos distrust China and view the country as the Philippines' greatest threat. So now with the statement from the president, would that change?
Well, I think improving ties with your biggest trade partner is important, and so that position, does not clash with keeping our country stand on the West Philippine Sea. So these two points do not collide,
Yeah.
So,
Understood.
in fact, strengthening ties with your country's biggest trade partner, which is also a major supplier of fuel, very important at the time of crisis, right? Like what we are facing right now. So actually, beyond fuel, fertilizers also is a concern.
Yes.
And at the same time, continuing the expansion of the commodity trade, getting investments. At a period of uncertainty in the global trade environment, a lot of there's the tit for tat tariff wars, disruptions in the supply chains. So deepening trade relations with a big neighbor and a trade partner the size of China is important. Last year under Malaysia's chairmanship of ASEAN, ASEAN and China concluded an upgrade of their free trade agreement, to cover green and digital economies and support for micro and small and medium enterprises.
I see.
So I think the Philippines now as the chair, of course, we're trying to conclude a COC document, the Code of Conduct on the South China Sea, to prevent untoward incidents in that flashpoint. But I think the trade is also very important. And so we can build on what Malaysia began last year with the upgrade of the ASEAN-China FTA, continuing to diversify the trade partners of the Philippines, but also that of the region. But of course, we have to recognize also that there will be some difficulties in defending this position, given the information you shared. The trust deficit between the Philippines and China is high. So government would have to expend political capital to defend the position of deepening, expanding economic ties with China, while at the same time keeping the country's position in the West Philippine Sea solid, right?
Yes.
So, of course, we all know that the previous Duterte government had been criticized because of the perception that the country was not as vocal in terms of defending its position. So the previous Duterte government had to expend some political capital to defend the position. Even the idea of entering into an MOU on oil and gas exploration with China. And so President Marcos Jr. now, of course, we all know that he just barely had 3 years left in office. And, we are experiencing this major crisis in energy. So he would have to, of course, expend political capital to defend the need for the country to stabilize relations with China in order to secure supplies of energy or fertilizers, at the same time not diminishing the country's position in the West Philippine Sea, and of course not at the expense of fraying ties with other partners like U.S., which, as we all know, we would have a Balikatan exercise coming. It would still be big in terms of scale and scope. So I think maintaining relations and deepening ties with key trade partners like China, at the same time, keeping alliance partnership is very important.
Yeah. Okay. So nonetheless, it's a balancing approach, and the Philippines is open to all countries, particularly in its relationship with other countries like China, the United States, and some other allied countries. But one last thing, Professor Lucio, recent statement from the president saying it is time to reset ties with China. So, is this the actual litmus test of the administration's foreign policy?
Well, I think this crisis, this oil shock, as they say, your friends or your partners, you'll know when you face a major crisis. And before, of course, we learned during the pandemic, China was one of the first countries to dispatch, medical experts to share best practices in the fight against COVID-19, and also delivered donated doses of vaccines at the time when the supply of such critical commodity is very scarce, And of course, we all know that China also donated supplies like fertilizers and typhoon relief, during disasters in the Philippines. And so now, the Philippines is in discussion with China as well as other suppliers for fuel, of course, for fertilizers also. So I think, this shows that despite of the differences we have with our big neighbor, our biggest state partner, during times of crisis, we all face this problem, right?
Yes.
And I think this is where a good neighborliness, magnanimity is shown, right? And of course, we will have to see whether China will extend immediate assistance to the Philippines, But as we all know, other countries also requested the same assistance, including our other ASEAN partners, other ASEAN neighbors. They also made requests for China for fuel, for fertilizers, and we will have to compete. We are also among the countries which also request the same from China, and so the relations is very important. In order to ensure that you get what you want in a time of crisis, emergency, as we are facing right now. So I think that having good relations with countries close to you, geographically and economically, is very crucial. So I think this is a call for the Philippines to have a steady and a stable, a consistent policy in dealing with China,
Yes.
with crisis or not. The
Yes.
importance of maintaining stable ties with China. It need not be too cozy, but stable enough to ensure that despite of the differences, neither side is giving in, neither side is conceding to the other. They're both keeping their different position on the issue of the South China Sea, but they are able to work together on other areas, notably in the economics.
And there's a one word for that, Professor Lucio Pitlo III, cooperation. And
Yes, exactly.
cooperation between Manila and Beijing. And also what matters now, Professor Lucio, is the Philippines to secure supply or stable supply of oil and gas, given that we are now facing some shortages in some areas, and also the increasing oil prices. And now the excise tax or suspension of excise tax law has been signed by the president. Would have a significant impact on oil prices. But although there are some sources told that our oil and gas supply will last us for about 30 days. So, and also the time is ticking, and we need to secure those pressure supply of oil and gas. And in the end, Professor Lucio Pitlo, it must be a balancing approach now. Although we should not leave the territorial disputes with China, but now what important is to secure our supply and also establish warmer ties with Beijing.
Yeah, so I think this crisis in the Middle East is an opportunity for us to revisit, rethink our foreign policy, Of course, the need to really stabilize steady ties with major partners like China without, compromising our position.
Yes.
Which is, this is not unprecedented. Our other neighbors are doing it, and we did try to do it. The previous government.
Yes.
I think the point about joint exploration or development of oil and gas in the West Philippines, it might be difficult because of the constitutional, the legal constraints, and potential public opposition. But I think the other areas like developing, offshore petroleum in areas outside the West Philippine Sea, or tapping, accelerating the transition to green energy, the wind, the solar capacity, the electric vehicles, developing a charging infrastructure for the increasing market for EV cars, in the Philippines. These are areas where China can come in and help the Philippines. And a stable relations with China is necessary for that to happen.
Okay, and very well said. And we're looking forward if this relationship with the Philippines and China will be consistent, will be consistently good, and if this relationship be maintained by both sides. And with that, thank you so much for joining us in the program, Professor Lucio Pitlo III, foreign policy expert and at the same time president of Philippine Association for Chinese Studies and research fellow at Asia Pacific Pathways to Progress Foundation.
Thank you.
All right. And with that interview of the program with Professor Lucio Pitlo III, we now conclude this edition of Front and Center on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Together with our technical team headed by Mr. Milo Janela, on Wirecast, Justin Osias, and audio operator, we have Mr. Leo Magpayo. This is your host, Jerome Toledo. Until next time, mabuhay.
You have just heard and watched Front and Center. Front and Center. Join us again for another edition here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Front and Center.